because they are made up of two people who are ever changing. We are constantly changing in a relationship. I want us to take a few minutes today to look at six stages or phases of marriage, and hopefully we can learn some things that will help us to be better prepared for those stages as we approach them. Because I believe in looking ahead, being aware of what the potential things could be involved in that period of my life, and then begin to be prepared for that as best we can.
Ecclesiastes 3:1-8 says this: "There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to mend, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace."
So as the Bible says, there's a time and there's a season for all things. Marriages have seasons. We have different times. We are changing, and because of that, our marriage changes, and we go through different seasons in our relationship. Let's talk about these for a few minutes. The first stage is called the fantasy stage. The fantasy stage. This stage also has been called to refer to the courtship or the romance stage. This phase or stage can last anywhere from 2 months to 2 years. From 2 months to 2 years. Remember when you first met each other? Remember the first time you met each other? Everything was absolutely amazing. You couldn't get enough of each other, could you? You couldn't get enough of one another. Neither one of you could do anything wrong in the eyes of the other. Mainly because you were both on your best behavior. You're putting your best foot forward. I remember every time I was dating Sue, every time I made sure I had everything in place, everything was just right, I put my best foot forward and tried to make my best impression every single time I was with her. Because I thought she was the most wonderful woman in the world, and she is. And I wanted to impress her. The focus at this stage was on what you both had in common. You had so many shared interests that you could practically become the same person. You felt like, man, this person has the same interests I do, and we like all the same things. This is wonderful. This is awesome. Look at all the things we have in common together. Your focus is on pleasing each other. Conflict must be avoided at all costs. You could not imagine living without each other. You spend as much time together as possible. Remember those days? This is the stage when you have your defenses are down. And this helps, of course, the falling of love process to occur because all defenses are down and we are overwhelmed with each other.
Yep, those were the days, weren't they? And then what
They
happened?
were the days.
Those were the days, my friend. I thought they'd never end.
We thought they'd never end, right.
And then you come into the adjusting stage.
Second stage, right.
And this one is where you find out you aren't the same person after all, and you find out that you really are different, and you have different ways of looking at things and different experiences that you're bringing into your relationship. And this is where you discover the role expectations. You know, you don't even know what your expectation is until your partner violates it. That's how you figure out what your expectation was, because they didn't fill it. And when Ted and I married, I was from Detroit, Michigan. Most of you know that. I grew up in kind of an inner city type of a neighborhood. I thought it was normal that everyone grew up listening to Polish language, Russian language, French, Italian, Norwegian. All my friends on my block they were like the second generation of folks who had been immigrants then. So we heard all these languages, we ate different foods, ethnic foods all the time, and to me that was quite normal. That's how I was raised. I always called my scarf a babushka. I didn't even know it was called a scarf. It was a babushka because my friends on my block called them that. So that is my background. I grew up where we didn't even have a car. You took a bus most everywhere or walked where you needed to go. I can remember vividly the first car our family bought and how exciting that was. And I was not in a country setting ever. Think of a big city, lots of traffic, lots of people, lots of crime. You didn't go any place, and when I was growing up alone, you wouldn't think of it. You always had to have somebody near you, and you had to have a certain look about you when you went walking down the street. You could never look intimidated. You had to develop that. So that was sort of my background. I got married to this man who's from southern Missouri, a little town of Carthage, where they never locked their doors. We locked everything in Detroit. You locked that door. You never would think of having your door unlocked. And we are married, and I'm so shocked that his family doesn't lock doors. They take their keys.
We never locked our house.
Yeah, or the car.
Or at night. We never locked the car. We always took the key out, drop it on the floorboard. It's always the floorboard in case you need the car.
I couldn't even imagine it. People where I grew up would take your car out of your driveway without the keys in it. So I mean, this was just shocking to me.
We trusted everybody. We thought, hey, it's safe. Just leave the key here. Leave the house open at night. Somebody wants to come in, they could come in.
Oh, it's just so weird. So we get married now, and we are going to have our first weekend at his home in Carthage, Missouri, staying the weekend. And I am in bed, and I can't get to sleep, and I am fretful. And he said, what is wrong with you? And I said, I cannot sleep with this door unlocked. You've got to lock this door. I can't sleep with the door unlocked. And he said, we can't lock the door. Grandma lives next door. She comes over during the night. We've got
Grandma
we
might
have
come
to
over.
leave the door open.
They can't lock Grandma out.
Yeah, Grandma comes over. I'm like, oh.
No way.
I said, oh, I was so worried. So I said, bad things happen when you don't lock your door. So early in the morning, wee hours of the morning, I am sound asleep, and I awaken to the most heart-wrenching screech. I knew someone immediately was being murdered. And I sat up in the bed, and I shook Ted awake, and I said, wake up, I told you should lock the door. Someone's being murdered. And he's trying to wake up, and he's trying to listen to me, and I'm telling him someone's being murdered, and he goes, what? I said, someone's screaming. Someone's a terrible scream. I've never heard a scream like this. And he looks at me with the most unbelievable look, really. And
shock.
He
It was
says,
shock.
what are you listening to? And I said, there it is again. And he said, Sue, are you kidding me? I said, what? He goes, that's a rooster
It's a
crowing.
rooster. She'd never heard a rooster up close and personal before. Never had.
They sound horrible, by the way.
She thought somebody was dying, for sure.
I did not ever know what a real rooster sounded like till that weekend as a new bride.
You see them on TV cartoons and stuff.
In cartoons, they say cock-a-doodle-doo. Right? So that was one of our things. Another thing that happened to show our differences was we'd been married 2 years. We graduated from college. We get an appointment to Kansas City, Missouri to stay at the Highlands Children's Home. Ted was the assistant administrator there, and we had children in the home. This was an old mansion. It was the old Pinkerton Mansion. Pinkerton used to be the mayor of Kansas City back during the bootlegging days. And down in this mansion that we were living in were passageways and tunnels that they had made to hide liquor in the mayor's mansion, okay?
He's a bootlegger,
Yeah. So this house was deeded over to the Assemblies of God with the stipulation it would always be a children's home. So this beautiful, beautiful mansion in a horrible part of Kansas City, 1810 East 48th Terrace, Kansas City, big, huge columns across the front of the house. It was a beautiful old home, but it was spooky. And it had this winding stairway that went up. And for some reason, the administrator decided Ted and I should stay in an apartment on the 3rd floor. Now, they were phasing out childcare when we arrived. The area had become so unsafe that they decided to take the children out of this house and put them in foster care. So by the time we arrived, we only had 3 children left in the home and us. And the first month we were there, they took those 3 children and placed them in foster care. So now it was me and Ted in this great big house, 3 stories, plus this basement, spooky basement. And we were in charge of this house and the office work and things during the day and helping to place babies into adoption, those kinds of things. They were converting it now from a children's home to a home for unwed mothers. And it's a very long story. So we were there during this time of change, interim time. So now we are staying in this 3rd floor apartment, no air conditioning. It was the hottest, stickiest summer, all by ourselves, just me and Ted.
The director wouldn't live there. He had to go to the suburbs where it was safe. So he takes this young couple and puts us in a place that's very dangerous by ourselves.
The sirens were going off all the time. Home alarms were ringing constantly around us. That is the setting we're in.
People being killed and robbed.
And there was always something in the news about someone who got shot just around the block from us, or other terrible crimes that were taking place within the walking distance of where we were living. So you can imagine now, with my background, that I'm not taking this in a very calm manner. So we are upstairs now sleeping, and a terrible storm comes. A tornado warning goes. The sirens are going off. We run all the way down those stairs to the basement, take shelter in the basement, wait for the all clear. Finally, that whistle blows up the stairs. We go back up to our 3rd floor apartment. It is so hot from this terrible storm that I decide we can lay on the floor. It was a linoleum floor. And we had a little door right there that led to the fire escape. So I thought this would be good. You know, we can maybe some air come in from underneath the door. So we're laying there in our, my pajamas, his underwear, and we're laying on this cold floor.
My Fruit of the Looms, okay.
So we're on this tile floor now, trying to fall asleep. And we finally get to sleep, and we are sleeping. We're so tired, and all of a sudden, you know how when somebody's climbing a fire escape, it vibrates?
Bong,
you know?
Bong,
bong,
bong.
Bong.
Yes, that's how it sounded.
Someone's on our fire escape climbing up to our door. And I was just petrified. And I'm laying there trying to remember how many steps do we have that lead up there. I'm trying to count where they might be on this fire escape. And so I shake Ted awake. And I said, wake up, somebody's out on the fire escape. And he goes, what? And I said, listen, you can hear their footsteps. And he goes, okay. And so we're laying there, and sure enough, bong, bong. He said, how many steps have you counted? I said, I think I'm at 30. And he said, okay, we got to have a plan. We've got to have a plan.
Always have a plan. Always have a plan.
He said, here's what we'll do. He said, I think the element of surprise will work here.
I'll try surprise, I said.
He said,
I said, Sue, I'm going to go over and unlock that door. She said, oh, don't lock the door. I said, I've got to. I said, as I'll unlock the door, and I went over and reached and unlocked the lock real quick.
But you told the other thing I should do.
I said, Sue, I'm going to jump up in a few minutes. When I think he's up at the top landing, I'm going to jump up, open the door, and scream and yell and try to scare him off the balcony, off of that landing. So I was prepared. I was prepared to leap out and scare him. And she was supposed to run down the hall, pull the fire alarm. There's a fire alarm down the hall, and then go hide. We had a spot we had picked out before that was a great place to hide.
There was an actual secret like closet, and it looked like a bookshelf, just like you see in movies. And you slide that thing, and you can go behind the bookshelf and hide. So that was where I was supposed to hide. Pull the fire alarm, hide.
I said, when the time is right, you run, pull the alarm, and I'll scare the person that's coming up the ladder. And we kept gets a little louder and a little louder. We think, okay, now it's time.
Bong.
So I'm crouched there. I'm ready to jerk the door open.
So he does this. He flings that door open.
And
I'm in awe of him. And I forget what I'm supposed to do.
She didn't run. She's supposed to run down the hall. She didn't do it.
He jumps out on the landing. He was not supposed to jump out on the landing.
I leaped out on the landing, and I'm yelling and waving my arms as loud as I can. I'm screaming as loud as I can, yelling, trying to scare anybody coming up, and there was nobody there.
It was a raindrop. raindrop was falling.
Raindrops were
Bong.
hitting on those metal steps.
Bong.
Bong, bong.
So he turns to me and he says, Sue, we have got to do something about your imagination.
Your imagination. I said, you have too vivid of an imagination. It's going to get somebody killed. You've got to be careful with this thing. So here I am out there in the middle of the night screaming and yelling. All the neighbors, because the houses aren't that far away, they can hear me out there wondering, what in the world?
They probably saw you out there.
They probably saw me out there. Yeah, it would really be bad. Then through the looms. That's just about all I had on. And I'm out there just, awful, awful, awful.
So we call this the adjustment stage, or we can call this like the disillusionment stage.
Yes, it is.
It's when you realize that your spouse is actually a human being after all.
Oh, yes.
And you get to know one another more and more, and you might feel annoyed at each other over your quirks and your weirdness that you think each one has. Maybe your spouse slurps their soup now and it bugs you.
Yes.
This is kind of the adjusting stage.
Oh.
And did you realize that during your fantasy or romance stage, you had biological effects going on as well?
You sure do. You have all kinds of things happening in your body. That first phase, the romance phase, we don't realize what's going on, but there's a lot of things happening in our body as well. Your body produces enormous amounts of endorphins. And this makes you both feel like unusually happy. You're happy all the time. You're positive. You're excited because those endorphins are really being pumped into your body. Those first couple of years, it's awesome. Oh, this is wonderful. This is great. This can also be described as that head over heels phase of love, the kind of love that you have. So the bottom line, though, is this. You were happier than you've ever been before, those first couple of years of romance phase, and you could not imagine ever feeling any different. You thought, this is the way it's going to be the rest of my life. I'm going to be happy, happy, happy all my life.
And that's what's in romantic novels and movies.
Oh, yes.
They only focus on that first little 2-year phase of your marriage,
Right.
romantic love, but it cannot last forever.
No.
Since our bodies couldn't possibly continue producing the same levels of endorphins that we had those first 2 years, that feeling of
shame.
being on top of the world starts to decline.
Uh-oh.
And your partner's little habits aren't quite as cute as you once thought they were.
Oh, yes.
But there's still enough goodwill left over from that romance and fantasy stage that you're willing to overlook them.
At least for a time, yes.
And when all of this begins to happen, the thing that we need the most right here at this point is called effective communication. Mm-hmm. And how to resolve conflict effectively is as important a skill ever needed on this planet Earth. We need to learn how to work in the area of communication so that you don't get all into despair because these things are starting to happen in your relationship.
Back early in our marriage, after the romance thing, we started having some challenges now and then. Who doesn't? I came home one day after a long day at school, then went to work after that, came home in the evening, and Sue was busy in the kitchen, little kitchen we had there, fixing something. I come in and I say, hi, Sue, and I come in, I look over her shoulder, I said, oh, I just love chicken and dumplings. She's making the chicken and dumplings. Oh, I just love chicken and dumplings. This is awesome.
And I got so hurt, and I turned and looked at him, and I said, chicken and dumplings, this is gravy.
Well, there were some good-sized lumps in that. I thought it was chicken and dumpling. So be careful, guys, what you say about your wife's cooking, okay? I learned some lessons there. Talk about the third stage now, Sue.
Well, it's the disappointment or the distress stage.
Oh, yes.
And this often is where a power struggle will start to emerge between the two different people.
Yes.
And as the characteristics from the disillusionment stage intensify, they can become more challenging to cope with. And some couples begin to start pulling away from each other during this phase. And at this point, you usually believe that the conflict that you're having is a bad thing. You tell yourselves this must be a bad thing. And what makes it so difficult is that you are becoming more and more aware of the many differences you really do have with your spouse. And then you try to figure out boundaries in your relationship, and then little annoyances start to become bigger things. And it's at this stage where you start to define, whether it's out loud or just in your mind, what you think is acceptable or unacceptable behavior. And most couples, when they hit this phase right in here, is where they actually start to entertain the idea of leaving the relationship. You start to think your spouse is self-centered, or they're uncaring, or even worse, they can't be trusted. And then deep resentments start to grow and build inside of you if you do not find a good way to resolve conflict, to keep respectful with each other. And that is a key word. Respect is so key. Mutual respect with one another. That is a critical place for respect to really kick in. And you must develop that. If you don't, some habits can start developing that will actually undermine the oneness that God wants to create in our marriages. God thought of marriage. It's his idea.
Right.
And he wants oneness between you. But when you hit this phase and you're not prepared for it and you don't understand what's going on with you, this is where you can really have some unfortunate things happen. You've got to learn to manage your differences effectively. It's a given you're going to be different. And my husband has said this through the years of our marriage. If we both thought alike all the time on every subject, one of us is not necessary. You know, you need the differences. It's a good thing, and it can be a compliment.
That's right. It makes a great adventure when you both are working at things together from a different perspective. Now, this disappointment, distress stage is so important that we realize that all these stages, you'll have these stages in marriage. These are not optional.
They're not unusual.
You'll go from one to the other over time, believe me. If you're married, you're going to go from one to the next. And this is one that every couple faces sooner or later, and it is imperative that couples learn to manage their differences effectively. Don't be upset because your spouse is different or thinks different. A lot of people seem to think, get my word out here, that their spouse should be able to read their minds. And somehow during this period of time, it's so easy to get upset because your spouse doesn't know you, doesn't understand you, doesn't relate to you like you think they should. They'll never be able to relate to you if you don't tell them what your needs are. We need to be honest about things we're thinking and tell them the things that we need in a relationship. I can't guess. I wish I could read Sue's mind. Well, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I shouldn't read her mind. But, we need to be able to understand that it's important to talk these things out. We must learn to communicate very effectively. We need to learn to work together as a team to build our marriage. And this is a point in time when couples have to come to a point of making a decision to build their marriage. We've got to work at this. We've got to learn some things to help us. Perhaps go down and buy some books on communication, relationships, about how to do this right. And there's nothing wrong in getting more education and trying to find ways to improve in different aspects of your relationship. And so this is critical. Not surprisingly, this stage here, the disappointment, distress stage, is where most couples at that point decide to break up or file for divorce. This is a stage where they aren't capable of working it out. They refuse to work it out. They refuse to work at things together. They begin to make choices and say, I don't think I'm going to stay in this relationship. If you're able to work through all the landmines, negotiate through all the landmines of this phase, then you go to the next phase, and that's where things get a whole lot better. Tell us about it. Oh, I'll tell us about it real quick. This next phase, number 4, is called the stability stage, or phase. This is a restful, peaceful time. Can you imagine after going through all the disappointment and distress of stage 3, and all the feelings and all the hurts and all the things that goes with this stage, now all of a sudden, if you hang in there long enough and you keep working at it, you develop your communication and look for ways to stay connected and stay true to each other, if you can do that, the next phase is a restful, peaceful time. I love this. This stage is also called the friendship stage or the reconciliation stage. Couples can learn to cooperate with one another and to become more effective in the relationship. Some couples never make it to this point. They never make it to this phase. But the ones who do, who find themselves finally getting to this 4th phase, or stage, they will have deeper feelings of love for each other. They'll have a deeper connection. They'll have a deeper trust with their spouse. And the good thing about this stage is that you have a history. You have a history together. And most people begin to rely on the predictability of the relationship. You begin to realize your partner isn't perfect, but your personal differences aren't quite as threatening as they had been before. You're able to resolve most of your differences, at least to some extent, and you become more confident in your relationship. There is a deepening sense of friendship that takes place in this stage, and a commitment can be developed in places of those butterflies and those excitement you had in the fantasy stage just a few stages back. This stage is more solid. This is a better place to be even than romance phase. The only big problem here you have to guard against in this stage is that the danger here is to guard against drifting apart. Quite often, by the time couples get to this stage, they're very busy in life. They've got so many activities going on. Their careers are adjusting or growing. They may be going back to school. Their family's growing. The wife may be going to school or perhaps working as well as raising a family. And you have all of these demands and all these activities, and you're so busy doing this stuff out here that you don't have much time for each other. That's the only real big danger during this phase. So you have to really work hard to find time for each other, to keep your relationship strong, and to keep, we tell couples they should have a date night. Even when your kids are teenagers, mom and dad should have a date night. You should have a night once a week where you go out, just you and your spouse, and somebody else can take care of the kids or whatever, but you need to have time with your spouse to keep rekindling those flames, to keep everything in place, to have communication, to talk about more than just the kids. You've got to talk about each other. And so this stage is very important. The fifth stage is called the acceptance stage. The acceptance stage. This is also called the real love phase. In fact, according to Relationship Institute, this is staggering. Fewer than 5% of couples ever make it to the fifth stage. Fewer than 5% of couples ever make it to this stage. It's called the acceptance stage. If you and your spouse make it to this stage, you can actually be a team. You know you've got a lot of things going for you because you made it to this stage. You genuinely love each other. And you look out for the best for your partner as well as you do for yourself. You want the very best for them. Your spouse is your best friend. If you can stick through all the tough places along the way and get to this point, you have such a great relationship. There are few surprises about your spouse's habits or character. You've worked to overcome many of the challenges of life. You've worked together. You've worked hard to get to this point, and you've grown to accept and to support each other without restrictions. Yes, this is the time when your relationship becomes a true partnership. So finally, you get to this point, it becomes a partnership, a true desire for each one to do well in the relationship. This is called the acceptance stage.
When Ted and I got to go back to Nebraska recently to attend a special open house for a church we used to pastor, and we saw a number of couples and friends that we'd known through the years. And there was one couple that approached us, and they thanked us for our small part we played in their relationship. But I can't tell you what it did for my heart to see this couple still together and very close to one another, because they had gone through a terrible circumstance, a tremendous amount of pain with each other that they had brought on themselves. It was their doing, but most people would have given up on them and said, it's too late. You've got biblical grounds and all these things to dissolve this marriage. But the Lord spoke to her and told her, I have forgiven you, and I'm going to teach you how to forgive him. And it's a long, long story, but they have come to a place in their relationship that is so powerful. So I just want to encourage you, if you're sitting here and you've gone through painful things with your spouse, don't give up. God didn't give up on you, and he is willing to help you if you run to him and commit yourself to him and just totally depend on him to guide you and to direct this relationship. We are to be an example to the world of what God wants the world to see the church being. You know, before the church was formed, marriage was made. God, the first institution God developed was the institution of marriage. He brought man and woman together. And so we're to be like a miniature church in our marriage for the whole world to see. So don't be in despair if you're going through something that's painful and difficult and disillusioning. I just want to encourage you, don't give up, because when you hang in there, what's coming, it's worth it all. Believe me, it's coming. And the completion stage is the next one we want to just share a bit about. And it's where there's an ongoing stability and security that develops together. A couple in this stage can really learn to appreciate one another and their differences, and they can appreciate life that they've created through the power of God. I don't see how it's possible for any marriage to survive without God and without leaning on him and doing it his way. And it's during this time that a couple can benefit from creating even more of a sense of meaning and purpose for them as a couple. It's at this point when you do ministry together, there's nothing as satisfying as being partnered together to do something for God, whether it's to start reaching out to people in your neighborhood or your other family members, or teaching a Sunday school class together, or doing something together. It is an amazing opportunity for a oneness to come that only can be developed through the power of Jesus Christ and his presence in your marriage. The only one true way to build oneness and completion is to anchor your marriage in the Lord Jesus Christ. That I don't know anything else to tell you. You must have an anchor. What is the anchor? Jesus Christ. He wants you to anchor your relationship in him. Do you want me to share about that?
Please, yeah, please.
There's a pastor, his name is Lawrence Tuning, and he was at an all-time low in his life. His father had died. A few months later, he and his wife had experienced their third miscarriage. It was a little baby boy. Lawrence was having all kinds of health issues himself. His pastorate wasn't going the way he wanted it to go. He was feeling totally exhausted and disappointed and disillusioned. He took 6 months off of the ministry. He and his wife went away to try to recoup their strength. And he describes this as the darkest night of his soul that he was ever had experienced. And he said that while they were away together, he and his wife, he would sit at the piano and he would just play. He would just play for hours at a time, one hymn after another, one song after another. And he said, all of a sudden, he's playing a song and he realizes he doesn't recognize it. He doesn't know this song. And he grabbed a pen and he started writing. And he wrote down the music and he wrote down these words. And this song was born out of his darkest night, his most crushing time, the most painful moments of his life. God gave him a truly beautiful song. And it's been one of our favorites. Ted and I have loved this song through the years. We sing it to each other. But it is such a precious song. And I know some of you are going to recognize it. And some of the young ones are going to go, nope, never heard this. But it's a beautiful song. And he wrote these words. I have journeyed through the long, dark night, out on the open sea, by faith alone, sight unknown. And yet his eyes were watching me. The anchor holds, though the ship is battered. The anchor holds. I lost my place, so the sails are torn. I have fallen on my knees as I have faced these raging seas, but the anchor holds in spite of the storm. I've had visions. and I've had dreams. I've even held them in my hands, but I never knew they would slip right through like they were only grains of sand. I have been young, and I'm older now, and there has been beauty these eyes have seen, but it was in the night, through the storms of my life. Oh, that is where God proved his love to me. For the anchor holds, though the ship is battered. The anchor holds, though the sails are torn. I have fallen on my knees as I have faced those raging seas, and the anchor holds in spite of the storm. So that is our prayer for you as couples, that you figure out, where have you anchored your relationship? Are you planting it deep in Jesus Christ?
The only way to maneuver or navigate these stages of life, the only way to be truly successful is to know what's ahead, what potentially could be there, and then prepare for it. And the best way to prepare, of course, is to anchor our life to Christ and to trust him and to let God help us to develop as we're changing. I'm not the same man that she married back years ago. Same guy, but I'm different than I used to be.
You're better.
I'm better, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. She has changed as well. So we all, and she's better, by the way, as well. I better say that, hadn't I, guys? I better reciprocate there. So all I'm saying is that we will go through these stages. Whether if you're thinking about marriage someday, these are the stages you'll go through. If you're a young couple and you're now in that first phase, that romantic phase, perhaps entering the second phase, you'll be going through the other ones as time goes by. But we need something that's going to hold us together and keep us connected to the truth. We need an anchor that is solid, that is steadfast, that is sure. We need an anchor that's connected to the Lord and understanding that God is the one who can help this relationship become all that he wants it to be. It's a growth process, and sure, we all make mistakes. None of us has done as perfect. We've all have our times we've fallen short. But I'm telling you, God will help you. He will help to make your life stronger if you'll trust him. Will you stand with us as we allow God's Spirit to speak to us? Our worship team is coming back. We're going to end with one more song, but before we sing a closing number, let me just, I know this is kind of a unique question to ask, but the stage you're in, and you know where you're at by the descriptions of what we just talked about. If you're in a stage and you find yourself really struggling, can I just invite you to just come up with your spouse and just let us pray with you? All of us have been there. Sid, I've been there. We've been through all the stages. We know the struggles you can have in a relationship. We've seen our kids go through those different stages. Some made it successfully, others haven't. We've seen good friends try to maneuver through the different stages of married life. Some made it, some didn't. I don't think it has to be less. I don't think it has to be 5% or less of people succeeding. That to me is a troubling number when I read it. I think in the church it could be 100% of marriages can succeed if they'll let Christ be the one they're anchored to, if they will truly work out things together and set themselves aside and do the best they can to help their spouse serve each other. Be a servant-hearted person in your marriage. I do believe that God can help us to succeed. If I didn't, I wouldn't be a preacher. But I do believe that God's able to help us in every aspect of our life. He can help you in your marriage as well as anywhere else. He's there to help you. He's there to be your friend, your helper in your relationship. So as we prepare to sing, can I ask those couples that are struggling in some areas, maybe it's communication, maybe it's the differences are overwhelming, perhaps there's some tension, who knows? You know in your heart where God's speaking to you or not. You just step out, come on down, just come down, we'll pray with you, please. Don't be afraid to do that. You're saying, I need some extra prayer support right now to help us to navigate this stage and to be ready for what God has ahead of us. You don't want to be stuck in some of these areas. You can get help right now. Anybody else? Yes. Anyone else, God's speaking to your heart. Come on down, come right up to the front. We want to pray with you. So as we sing, as Jim leads us in the song, the altar's open, okay? And can I ask those that are around, some of the ladies come and pray with the women as they come, and guys, our prayer teams come up and help us as well, please, okay? The altar's open. Come and join us, please, okay? We're here to help you. We are here to help you. We want to be there for you.